Will the Democratic Republic of Congo slide into renewed turmoil? The ruling coalition has fallen apart, and the president is threatening to dissolve parliament. So, what's the fallout from this power struggle in this African country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi pledged to build a strong nation when he was elected last year. But his reforms have been challenged by supporters of former leader Joseph Kabila, who shares power with him. Tshisekedi has scrapped the ruling coalition, saying a new one will help him push through his agenda. He is seeking to flip the majority in the legislative body in his favor to be able to do just that. The president has threatened to dissolve parliament, hold new elections, and has acted to remove a Kabila ally as Speaker of the House. His decision has sparked chaos in the Assembly, and the political crisis is threatening stability in DRC. Tshisekedi says the move comes after weeks of consultations with political parties.
The consultations resulted in the rejection of the coalition between the Common Front Congo and the Heading for Change by an overwhelming majority. This sad conclusion comes after 2 years of tireless efforts and self-sacrifice to preserve the essentials within the coalition.
The pro-Kabila Common Front for Congo, or FCC, considers Tshisekedi's decision illegal.
The FCC notes that the unilateral conclusions drawn by the President of the Republic seriously violate the Constitution and serve as a pretext to liquidate established democratic institutions through the establishment of a dictatorial regime at the service of personal power.
Joseph Kabila ruled DRC for 18 years before stepping down around 2 years ago. His favored presidential candidate lost to Felix Tshisekedi in the long-delayed 2018 elections. But Kabila's power was retained when his allies won a parliamentary majority in the same vote. Tshisekedi formed a coalition government with Kabila's Common Front for Congo after assuming power last year. Major disagreements arose between the coalition partners, leading to political deadlocks in the past 6 months. They have differed over security, electoral process, and constitutional court appointments, to name but a few. All right, let's bring in our guests in Goma. We have Thomas Fessy, Senior Democratic Republic of Congo researcher at Human Rights Watch. Kambale Musavuli is researcher at the Center for Research on the Congo. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Nelleke van de Waal, Deputy Project Director for Central Africa at International Crisis Group. She joins us from Groningen in the Netherlands. Welcome to each of you. Kambale, how fragile is the current political situation in DRC? And considering the unresolved issues from the 2018 presidential election, do you believe that something like we're seeing now was inevitable?
Definitely inevitable. And the framing is really important. In December of 2018, Congolese in mass went to vote. They elected a leader, and the result did not reflect the will or the aspiration of the Congolese. The unlikely winner was declared the president of the Congo. That's Felix Tshisekedi. And what we know now, that there has been secret deals between Kabila and Felix, which was signed in front of Kenya, South Africa, and Egypt, creating this form of so-called Pacific transition. But because of that, because the will of the people was not listened to, we created a constitutional crisis. We have a winner of the presidential election who does not have any strong power within the parliament, any strong power within the institutions of the republic, and his coalition was really a cohabitation, as it's been seen, where Kabila remained in power, and to many analysts, Kabila is still controlling state institutions, which has made it completely difficult for Felix to run the country. And the only solution to that, and I hope the Congolese president is listening, and many people are listening, is to listen to the will of the Congolese people. In 1960, we voted for our leader, Patrice Lumumba, democratically, and I believe in 2020, we can do the same by listening to the will of people and having leaders that represent the people, so that we don't have the constitutional crisis as we have now.
Nelleke, how likely is it that President Tshisekedi will be successful in forming a new majority coalition?
It will be quite difficult for him to form a new majority in parliament because he will need substantial support of the FCC coalition that holds most of the seats in parliament. So in order for Tshisekedi to form a new majority, he not only needs to convince members of the opposition, so Moïse Katumbi, Jean-Pierre Bemba, but also members of the FCC to join his new majority.
Thomas, if this were to become a protracted crisis, how much could this paralyze the government and how much worse could things get?
This is definitely a risk. There's danger that if the crisis gets any longer, obviously there will be, popular discontent and growing anger at the paralysis of the state. Already, remember that during those last few weeks of consultations, it basically brought the government action to a halt. So there is an urgent need to find a peaceful way out of this crisis in a way that a government can be acting reforms towards building the rule of law, towards respecting human rights and ending impunity in the country.
Kambale, does President Tshisekedi have enough support from powerful politicians and from military leaders in order to be able to pull off forming a new coalition?
Forming a new coalition will not change the fact that the will of the people have not been listened to. But let's use that framework. Let's say today he's able to convince the opposition and political leaders and military leaders to come to his support. I do not know how that will address the 22 million Congolese who are at the verge of starvation, according to the World Food Programme. I do not know how this addresses the issue that in the eastern part of the DRC, thousands of Congolese have died. Just Kivu Security Tracker just published their report where they stated that about 2,127 Congolese have died in the past 20 months, which is more than the last 20 months of Joseph Kabila. So we have a serious material conditions of the Congolese that's being violated. Congolese are suffering, and this suffering is happening because the institutions of the republic has been actually been distributed to an elite that has no interest of the Congolese people. I argue that because Felix Tshisekedi lacks the credibility from the Congolese people, it's hard even for the Congolese people to come at his aid. But some of the proposals that he's put forward, which I think can be a way forward, such as having another election, knowing that the 2018 was very disputed, is a way in the right direction. But what's more important is decisive actions that he will have. Will he hold people like Dan Gertler accountable for taking stakes into the state Jekamin and creating a mining company suffering out millions of dollars? Will he arrest corrupt government officials? Will he, in the end, arrest Joseph Kabila, who is listed in the Justice Department's reports on Hatship, the hedge fund, as receiving corrupt money for bribery? This is an official legal case in the United States listing Joseph Kabila, Dan Gertler, and as well as the late Katumba Mwanke. Will he take those decisive actions? His actions will allow the Congolese people to trust in his will to really transform the country for a new Congo. If he doesn't come even close to those recommendations, I doubt he'll have time to control the country.
Nelleke, the United Nations envoy to the DRC warned that the threat of this political gridlock poses, it's a huge threat that the political gridlock poses to the country's security and economic situation. What are some of the repercussions that the country could face?
I think Sarugi is right in stating that because of the political gridlock between Tshisekedi and Kabila, there has not been a lot of progress on the political level and the economic one. It is because Tshisekedi has been distracted by political affairs in Kinshasa. And I think you can see that when you look at events and what's happening in the East, where violence has increased over the past few months. So Tshisekedi has also, because his focus on keeping the coalition together or working with Kabila, he has failed to work on improving the economic conditions in the DRC. So you see that it has become increasingly difficult for the Congolese population to benefit from wealth that has been acquired by natural resources in the DRC, etc. I mean, I'm not sure if I understood your question completely right, as in repercussions. So if I should touch upon something else, just
no.
let me know.
That answer sufficed with the question that I asked. Thomas, let me ask you, how much political clout does former President Kabila have? He's a senator for life. Is he essentially considered to be the only game in town when it comes to getting things done politically?
I think that was certainly true last year when the deal was made between Tshisekedi and himself. He has so far retained control of the government, control of the parliament, control of most provincial governments, and of the security apparatus. I think that 2 years down the line, and months of mounting political crisis, it is now a sort of question mark over how much of all that power Kabila still holds. There is the possibility, obviously, that he still holds most of that power, and I think we're going to see whether that's true or not in the coming weeks, in the coming days even. But it's also possible that some of the either parliamentarians or some of his supporters, may have switched to the other side because they see that this coalition is actually going nowhere and that they need a new majority to have a proper government that will be able to enforce meaningful reforms. So I think that's a question mark at the moment, but what we're seeing in the last few days is that the polarization between the two sides is at its peak, and we've seen clashes in parliaments between supporters of Tshisekedi and supporters of Kabila, literally throwing chairs at each other. And we're also hearing a lot of hatred language and extremist language from one side to another, and vice versa. So there's a sort of really sort of dangerous climate that has been brewing for months now, and it's not entirely clear how Tshisekedi intends to diffuse that tension, and whether Kabila has any intention to also try to diffuse that tension or not.
Kambale, I want to take a step back for a moment to try to explain the root of this a bit to our audience. It seems that tensions between FCC and CACH really erupted out into the open in July, and it revolved around the issue of the appointment of new judges to DRC's top court. What was at the root of that?
I think I'm going to try to frame it to really show how Kabila controls the state institutions. Before the presidential elections, he made sure that constitutional court judges were appointed who will pledge allegiance to him. Currently, in the parliament, when we look at the National Assembly, we have 500 members of that parliament, right? 350 of that are from the FCC. When we look at the Senate, we have 108 senators. 92 senators in the Senate are from the FCC. We have 26 provinces. 21 provincial governments are controlled by Kabila, and about 20 of those, the governors of these provinces are from Kabila regime. We have a military that Kabila still controls, and actually currently he has a military force, a militia of 2,500 soldiers. They are paid by the government right now to protect him. So he controls the state institutions, and he can actually move it in some shape or form. What Felix Tshisekedi tried to do was to include 3 new constitutional court judges, because the game of the election of 2023 will be played at an electoral level, usually in the constitutional court and also in the electoral commission. So he has made sure to introduce 3 judges, which Kabila was not happy about. And he also introduced a new president of the electoral commission, clearly showing that everyone is preparing for 2023. What does that mean even for Congolese? I mean, remember, Kabila has been in power for already 2 terms. So if we are already talking about 2023, it is likely that Joseph Kabila is going to run again and going to try to interpret the constitution much differently, or have someone who he controls to be in power. So by extension, there is a power struggle from Felix trying to assert his power when he does not have, and Kabila continuing to maintain the illicit network that he has built for the past 2 decades. And in the final analysis, the question of justice is very important. I think I will end by that. Dr. Mukwege called for these issues to end, the Congolese Nobel Peace Prize. He called for the International Tribunal for the Congo to try the crimes that have taken place. Congolese are facing people who have committed crimes in the past, who are leading the country, and they need to face justice.
Nelleke, the African Union has now called on the DRC's leaders to work to preserve peace and stability. What are the regional implications that we'd be looking at here if things continue to deteriorate in DRC?
Well, you see that since assuming office, Tshisekedi really focused on mediating within the region. So he tried to bring Musavuli, the Ugandan president, and President Kagame of Rwanda, to bring them together. And what was behind the struggle between these 2 men was allegations of support to armed groups in eastern DRC. So there is a big risk that when the violence escalates, or the political situation in Kinshasa escalates, that there are also implications in the east. That could, for instance, be because political leaders such as Kabila and Tshisekedi activate spoilers they have in the field in the east, or because violence continues to increase in the east. So the regional implications will be important. So I understand the call by the African Union, also because Tshisekedi will, as of January or February next year, chair the African Union. So it is interesting to see how he will try to increase stability, especially in the eastern part of the DRC.
Thomas, the head of the UN Stabilization Mission has expressed concern over the situation in eastern Congo, saying that insecurity, grave violations of human rights, and displacements continue to affect civilians, notably women and children. How dire is the situation there?
Well, it's pretty dire in eastern Congo. You have different pockets of conflict throughout the region, whether it is in North Kivu, in South Kivu, but also in Ituri and beyond. And just take Ituri itself, for example. You have over 1 million displaced people this year as a result of the many conflicts in that province alone. And attacks are almost daily. There's been a little bit of a lull in the attacks over the last few weeks, but it's coming back, and you can tell that tensions are running high, and that, again, it's civilians who are paying the heavy price. It's not only displacement, but the population is also suffering from many other abuses, whether it is beatings and arrest from armed groups, or sometimes by the Congolese security forces, military troops, or the police. But also abduction, kidnapping for ransom, and a lot of women are still suffering from sexual violence and sexual assault. So this has been going on for years and years now, and it's a conflict that repeats itself in some parts of the region, then you have over 100 armed groups, still active in that region, and as our colleagues have just said, each time that you have a protracted political crisis in Kinshasa, the repercussions in Eastern Congo are quite often immediate, or in the midterm, something could be ignited there. So there is a worry that the longer the political crisis continues, the more repercussions there will be in the East, with the population paying the price.
Kambale, do you believe that it's possible that we could see a negotiated end to this crisis? And if so, how would that come about?
It is possible for the crisis to actually be negotiated for peace and stability in DRC. I mean, what I would like to see is the return to the 2018 elections. Holding a new election will really help in getting the credibility, because the only way to move forward is to have the population, the people, to trust in the democratic process. So calling for a new election is one. Second, the call for justice is very critical. The crisis that we continue to see is because the crimes of yesterday has not been dealt with. Over 6 million Congolese people have died in the past 2 decades, and no one has paid for these crimes. The creation of an international tribunal, per the recommendation of the UN Mapping Exercise Report published on October 1st, 2010, is critical at this time. Dr. Mukwege, the Nobel Peace Prize, has called for it, and Congolese around the world are all calling for this tribunal to be put in place. If those two things are actually put in place, a re-election, running again of the elections, so that the people can trust in the democratic process, and the creation of a tribunal for the DRC, we have a path to peace in DRC.
Nelleke, how do you think the international community would react if President Tshisekedi does indeed try and hold new elections?
I think it will be very difficult for Tshisekedi to organize new elections, because it will be a very costly exercise. And as you saw in 2018, it took quite a long time to organize those elections. In fact, they were pushed back twice. So for the international community, I don't think they would consider elections the right way forward at the moment. Organizing them is costly, as I just said, but also elections were held in 2018. The results were indeed contested, but I think for international actors, it is more important now to underline the importance for the respect for the rule of law, to have strong state institutions, to make sure that the two political actors, the main ones, so Kabila and Tshisekedi, find a way out of this crisis, a political one. So encourage them to have a dialogue, to have conversations, not necessarily with the goal or the intention to keep the coalition together, but to make sure that the crisis does not escalate. So, as I just pointed out, to avoid that the political crisis becomes a military one, you just asked for the fact who controls the security forces, who controls the army. I think it is very important to look the next few days and weeks what's going to happen with the military and the armed groups in the East, and avoid that these actors will play a role in the weeks to come.
All right, well, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thanks so much to all of our guests, Thomas Fessy, Kambale, Musavuli, and Nelleke van der Wal. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.